Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the Trinity of ancient Greece, the gods who shaped the cosmos. Today, we journey back in time to uncover the myths, the mysteries, and the timeless truths behind the three most powerful gods of the Greek pantheon: Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. These three gods were not just characters in stories. They were the very embodiment of human fears, hopes, and attempts to understand the universe. Zeus, the ruler of the skies, the thunder-wielding king of Olympus. Poseidon, the tempestuous master of seas and earthquakes. And Hades, the dark yet necessary sovereign of the underworld, guarding the mysteries of death and rebirth. In this video, we will dive deep into each god's mythology, symbolism, and legacy. We will uncover the stories that made them feared, respected, and worshipped. And in the end, we will tie this Greek Trinity to other religious systems and ancient truths, showing how humanity across time and culture has always sought to understand creation, power, and the mysteries of life and death through divine archetypes. Stay until the end to unlock hidden meanings and gain deep understanding of the gods. So prepare yourself for a journey through myth and meaning as we step into the realms of the three brothers who divided the world: Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Zeus, the Sky Father and King of Olympus. When we think of Greek mythology, one name dominates the heavens: Zeus. His image is etched into our cultural memory, a towering, bearded god with thunderbolts in hand, seated upon a throne, watching over both mortals and immortals with a gaze that could be both protective and terrifying. But Zeus was more than just a mythological superhero. He represented the ancient Greeks' understanding of order, justice, authority, and the untamable power of the sky. Zeus's story begins with a prophecy. His father, Cronus, the Titan who ruled before the Olympians, feared that one of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father, Uranus. To prevent this, Cronus devoured each of his children the moment they were born. But Zeus's mother, Rhea, could not bear to lose another child. When Zeus was born, she tricked Cronus by wrapping a stone in swaddling clothes, which he swallowed instead. Meanwhile, she hid the infant Zeus on the island of Crete, where he was raised in secret. In this act of deception lies one of the earliest lessons about Zeus: the inevitability of change. No matter how tightly power clutches at control, the cycle of destiny cannot be stopped. The rise of Zeus was written into the fabric of myth, a story that echoes across cultures where sons often surpass fathers, symbolizing renewal and evolution. When Zeus came of age, he confronted Cronus. With the help of the goddess Metis, he forced his father to regurgitate his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Together, they waged war against the Titans in a conflict known as the Titanomachy. The battle was fierce and cosmic, shaking the very foundations of the universe. Lightning clashed against stone, and mountains trembled under the force of divine power. In the end, Zeus and his siblings emerged victorious. The Titans were cast into Tartarus, a shadowy abyss, and the Olympian gods rose to rule the cosmos. Zeus, as the leader, became the king of the gods, the Sky Father, and the wielder of the thunderbolt. The thunderbolt was not just a weapon. It symbolized divine justice, power, and the ultimate authority of Zeus. To the Greeks, a storm in the heavens was not random. It was Zeus himself expressing his will. Thunder was his voice, lightning his warning. Even more, the thunderbolt symbolized the unpredictability of life. Just as lightning could strike suddenly and change everything, so too could the hand of fate, guided by Zeus. This made him both a god, to be revered and feared. While many myths paint Zeus as a god of power, his role as upholder of justice and order was equally important. He was known as the protector of kings, the guardian of oaths, and the punisher of those who broke sacred laws. In fact, Zeus was often invoked in the name of Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality. In ancient Greece, treating strangers with respect was not just a cultural courtesy. It was a religious duty, for any guest could be under the protection of Zeus Xenios. Violating this sacred trust meant incurring his wrath. This shows how Zeus represented the moral structure of Greek society. While he was far from perfect, often entangled in myths of affairs and conflicts, his overarching role was to maintain balance, law, and order in a world that could otherwise descend into chaos. No discussion of Zeus would be complete without acknowledging his countless affairs. Zeus's romances, both consensual and controversial, led to the birth of many heroes and demigods: Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, and countless others. But what did these myths mean? To the Greeks, Zeus's children symbolized the spread of divine influence into the mortal world. Heroes were not just individuals of great strength or courage. They were living proof of divine bloodlines, bridging the gap between gods and men. At the same time, these myths revealed a truth about power. It is expansive, restless, and always seeking to extend its influence. Zeus's endless affairs were more than stories of lust. They symbolized the overwhelming, inescapable reach of authority, just as the sky stretches endlessly above. Yet Zeus was not a flawless ruler. Many myths show him as jealous, vengeful, and inconsistent. He punished Prometheus harshly for giving fire to humanity, chaining him to a rock where an eagle devoured his liver each day. He often quarreled with other gods, and even his queen, Hera, plotted against him at times. These stories reflect a critical truth. Even divine authority is not perfect. For the Greeks, their gods were not distant ideals, but beings who mirrored human strengths and weaknesses on a grand scale. Zeus's flaws made him relatable, reminding people that power is always complicated, never simple. Over time, Zeus's image evolved. To philosophers like Plato, he was not just a myth, but a representation of cosmic order. To later Romans, he became Jupiter, the god of law and governance. And even today, his archetype survives in our vision of the Sky Father, a central authority figure in many religions. Zeus is the eternal reminder that power comes with responsibility, that order must be maintained, and that justice, even when flawed, is the foundation upon which societies rest. Poseidon, lord of the seas and earthquakes. If Zeus commanded the skies, then his brother Poseidon ruled the waters that surrounded and sustained Greece, the seas, rivers, and springs. To the ancient Greeks, whose lives depended on the unpredictable moods of the ocean, Poseidon was both a provider and a destroyer, a god of duality who could grant calm waters or unleash devastating storms. To understand Poseidon, we first need to understand the sea itself. For the ancient Greeks, the Aegean and Mediterranean were not barriers but highways of trade, war, and exploration. Every journey, every expedition, every fleet was at the mercy of Poseidon's mood. Unlike Zeus, whose rule was tied to justice and cosmic order, Poseidon's domain was one of raw, untamed power. The sea was beautiful and bountiful, but it was also violent, destructive, and unpredictable. Poseidon embodied this duality perfectly. When sailors prayed for safety, they prayed to Poseidon. When earthquakes shattered cities, the ground shaking like waves upon the shore, they blamed Poseidon, the earth shaker. His power was not only vast, but immediate, felt directly in the lives of mortals. Like Zeus, Poseidon was a son of Cronus and Rhea, and like his siblings, he too was swallowed at birth, only to be freed when Zeus rose against their father. After their victory, the three brothers divided the cosmos. Zeus took the skies, Poseidon claimed the seas, Hades was given the underworld. This division was not a quarrel, but a pact, an agreement of balance. Each realm was vital, and each brother's role was necessary for the survival of the universe. Poseidon's dominion over the sea gave him incredible power. The Greeks, whose entire civilization was shaped by seafaring, saw him as one of the most immediate and fearsome gods in their daily lives. Poseidon is almost always depicted with a trident, a three-pronged spear forged by the Cyclopes. With it, he could stir storms, create tidal waves, and shatter the earth. The trident symbolized more than just destruction, however. Its three prongs represented dominion, balance, and penetration of the depths. Where Zeus's thunderbolt ruled the skies with sudden flashes of authority, Poseidon's trident was a tool of persistence, carving into the depths of the ocean and shaking the foundations of the earth. In essence, Poseidon represented depth, mystery, and uncontrollable change. Perhaps one of Poseidon's most fascinating roles was his connection, not just to water, but to earthquakes. In a land like Greece, where seismic activity often shook cities to their foundations, Poseidon's fury was a constant fear. An earthquake could topple temples, destroy homes, and alter landscapes in an instant. For the Greeks, this was not random geology. It was Poseidon striking the earth with his trident, a reminder that his power extended beyond the sea into the very bones of the earth. This dual dominion over both sea and land made him a god of transition and disruption, one who blurred boundaries and symbolized the chaotic forces of nature itself. While Zeus's myths often highlight his authority and justice, Poseidon's stories frequently show him in conflict, rivalry, or contest. One of the most famous tales is Poseidon's contest with Athena for the city of Athens. Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, producing a saltwater spring, or in some versions, a horse. Athena, however, offered the olive tree, a symbol of peace, prosperity, and sustenance. The citizens chose Athena's gift, and she became the patron goddess of Athens. Yet, Poseidon did not leave empty-handed. The horse, which many myths credit him with creating, became a symbol of speed, strength, and war. In this way, Poseidon remained tied not only to the sea, but also to movement, conquest, and raw force. This rivalry reveals an essential truth about Poseidon. His gifts were powerful, but often destructive. Where Athena symbolized wisdom and strategy, Poseidon embodied passion and force. Both were necessary, but the Greeks favored wisdom to guide their city, a telling sign of how they valued control over chaos. Like Zeus, Poseidon fathered many children, both divine and monstrous. Among them were heroes like Theseus, one of the great champions of Athens, but also terrifying creatures like the Cyclops Polyphemus, encountered by Odysseus in the Odyssey. Poseidon's offspring reflected his nature, unpredictable, sometimes noble, sometimes monstrous, always powerful. His children often tested the boundaries between gods and mortals, order and chaos. Perhaps the most famous story involving Poseidon is Homer's Odyssey. After the Trojan War, Odysseus tried to return home to Ithaca, but along the way, he blinded Polyphemus, Poseidon's son. Enraged, Poseidon made Odysseus' journey nearly impossible, unleashing storms and obstacles that delayed him for 10 long years. This story highlights Poseidon's role as a god who tests mortals. While Zeus punished betrayal of justice, Poseidon punished arrogance, pride, and disrespect toward the forces of nature. Odysseus' suffering at sea was a reminder that man could not defy the power of the ocean without consequence. In this way, Poseidon symbolized not just destruction, but the humbling of humanity before forces greater than themselves. Another fascinating aspect of Poseidon was his association with horses. He was sometimes called Hippios, meaning of horses. Myths tell us he created the first horse by striking the earth with his trident. Horses, like the sea, were symbols of power, movement, and unpredictability. They could be tamed, but they always carried a wildness within them. By linking Poseidon to horses, the Greeks emphasized his role as the god of untamed energy, freedom, and danger. Poseidon was worshipped widely across Greece, especially in coastal cities and islands. Temples dedicated to him often stood near the sea, where sailors could make offerings before setting sail. One of the most famous is the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sunion, perched on a cliff overlooking the Aegean. Even today, its ruins stand as a haunting reminder of how deeply the Greeks feared and revered the sea god. Sailors offered sacrifices for safe passage, while cities prayed for protection against earthquakes. Poseidon was not a god one ignored. He was a god whose favor was necessary for survival. For philosophers, Poseidon represented the forces of nature that could never be fully tamed. He was the god of instability, transformation, and hidden depths. Where Zeus represented order and law, Poseidon embodied the chaos beneath the surface. And where Hades would later represent inevitability and finality, Poseidon symbolized the uncertain journey between stability and collapse. In modern times, Poseidon's image has survived as Neptune in Roman mythology, and even today we invoke him in stories of the sea. Sailors still name ships, submarines, and exploration vessels after him, a reminder that the ocean remains a place of both wonder and terror. Ultimately, Poseidon was the eternal reminder that we are at the mercy of forces beyond our control. The sea does not bend to human will, nor does the earth remain still for our convenience. In Poseidon, the Greeks saw the untamable spirit of nature, beautiful, bountiful, but also unforgiving. Hades, the keeper of the underworld. When people think of Greek gods, they often picture the shining peaks of Mount Olympus, the roaring seas, or the crack of thunder in the sky. But hidden deep beneath the earth lay a world just as important, just as powerful, the underworld. Its ruler was Hades, the third brother, often misunderstood and unfairly feared. While Zeus embodied authority and Poseidon symbolized untamed power, Hades represented something unavoidable and eternal: death, mystery, and the unseen forces that govern life's end. After the defeat of the Titans, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, cast lots to divide the world. Zeus took the heavens, Poseidon the sea, and Hades was given the realm of the dead. Though it may seem like Hades drew the short straw, the underworld was not a place of simple punishment. It was the vast, shadowy domain where every mortal soul eventually arrived, regardless of their status in life. Kings, peasants, warriors, and poets all passed through Hades' gates. Unlike Zeus and Poseidon, Hades did not constantly roam the world of mortals. He remained in his realm, silent, watchful, and absolute in his authority. One of the greatest misconceptions about Hades is that he was the Greek equivalent of the devil. But this is a distortion that came much later with Christian reinterpretations. To the Greeks, Hades was not evil. He was stern, impartial, and unavoidable. He did not seek to harm mortals, he simply ensured the natural order was maintained. Just as Zeus governed justice among the living, Hades governed balance among the dead. He was sometimes called Pluton, meaning the giver of wealth, because all precious metals and resources came from beneath the earth. This duality shows that Hades was not only the god of death, but also of fertility, wealth, and hidden riches. In this way, Hades symbolized both the end of life and the promise of transformation. The realm of Hades, the underworld. The underworld itself was a complex and fascinating place, far from a single idea of hell. The Greeks divided it into regions, each reflecting a different fate for the soul. The Asphodel Meadows, where ordinary souls wandered, neither punished nor rewarded. Elysium, the Elysian Fields, a paradise of eternal peace reserved for heroes, the virtuous, and those favored by the gods. Tartarus, a dark abyss of punishment, where the wicked and enemies of the gods were cast. The rivers of the underworld, the Styx, oaths and unbreakable promises, Lethe, forgetfulness, Phlegethon, fire, Cocytus, wailing, and Acheron, sorrow. Hades presided over all these realms, ensuring that souls found their rightful place. He was a judge, but also a caretaker of the natural cycle of existence. Perhaps the most famous myth of Hades is his union with Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of harvest and fertility. According to the myth, Hades fell in love with Persephone and abducted her, taking her to the underworld to be his queen. Demeter, stricken with grief, caused the earth to wither and famine spread among mortals. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades in the underworld and part with her mother on earth. Thus, the cycle of the seasons was born: spring and summer, when Persephone returns; autumn and winter, when she descends. This myth is profound because it ties Hades not just to death, but to renewal, fertility, and the eternal cycles of life. Without Hades, there could be no balance between life and death, no rhythm of the seasons, no rebirth after decline. In this way, Hades is not simply the god of endings, but the god of transformation, the reminder that death is not destruction, but transition. Hades rarely left the underworld, and when he did, mortals trembled. His very name was often avoided, replaced with euphemisms like Ploton to avoid invoking his presence. This avoidance reveals something important. Hades represented the unknown, the hidden, the inevitable, truth people feared to confront. We may look at him as the god of psychology's shadow, the part of life we suppress, ignore, or refuse to acknowledge. But just as the Greeks recognized, ignoring death does not make it vanish. It is always there, shaping how we live. Many heroes in Greek myth ventured into Hades' realm, and these journeys often mark turning points in their stories. Orpheus descended to the underworld to retrieve his beloved Eurydice, only to fail when he looked back too soon. Hercules, was tasked with capturing Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of Hades. Odysseus visited the underworld in the Odyssey to seek wisdom from the dead prophet Tiresias. Theseus and Pirithous foolishly tried to abduct Persephone and were trapped in Hades' realm. Each of these myths reveals something about the human relationship with death. It is a boundary that can be approached, but never conquered. Even heroes, no matter how strong, were humbled in the presence of Hades. Cerberus, the guardian of boundaries. Speaking of Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed dog who guarded the gates of the underworld, he too symbolized Hades' dominion. Cerberus did not allow the living to enter, nor the dead to escape, ensuring that boundaries remained firm. This highlights another truth about Hades. His role was to enforce limits. In life, there are natural boundaries: birth, growth, death, and Hades represented the immovable line that no one could cross freely. And why did the Greeks fear Hades? Because he reminded them of what they could not escape. Unlike Zeus, who could be appeased with prayers for justice, or Poseidon, who could be honored for safe passage, Hades represented something that came for all, no matter how pious or powerful. Yet this fear was balanced by necessity. Without Hades, there would be no cycle of life and death, no renewal of the earth, no balance in the cosmos. He was feared, yes, but he was indispensable. In Roman mythology, Hades became Pluto, god of wealth and the underworld. Later, as Christianity spread, the name Hades became synonymous with hell, twisting his image into something darker than the Greeks intended. Yet, if we strip away these later interpretations, Hades emerges as a god not of evil, but of truth, inevitability, and hidden power. He reminds us that confronting death is the key to understanding life. To deny Hades is to deny the reality that gives our existence meaning. When we step back from the individual stories of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, what we see is not three isolated gods, but a cosmic balance. The Greeks, like many ancient peoples, understood that the world was divided into realms: the heavens above, the seas that surrounded them, and the earth below, where death reigned. These three realms were not rivals, but interconnected domains, each essential to the fabric of existence. Zeus ruled the heavens, the air, the weather, the thunder, the order of kings and law. He was the voice of authority, the embodiment of structure. Poseidon ruled the seas and the shifting earth, unpredictable, violent, generous, yet destructive. He was the reminder of chaos, of nature's power, and of change. Hades ruled the underworld, the silent place of endings, where mortality meets transformation. He was the truth no one could escape, the inevitability that makes life precious. Together, the three brothers created a trinity that mirrored the cycle of existence itself. The sky gives rain to the sea nourishes the earth, and the earth returns life to the underworld. Balance is achieved not through one, but through all three. This triadic structure was not unique to Greece. Across the world, we find similar trinities, as if humanity instinctively understood that power, existence, and truth are never singular, but always divided into three. In ancient Egypt, the balance of gods also came in threes. Osiris, Isis, and Horus formed one of the most famous trinities. Osiris ruled the realm of the dead, much like Hades. Horus, a sky god, bore similarities to Zeus, while Isis bridged life and fertility, much like Poseidon bridged chaos and creation. Even deeper, Osiris's death and resurrection mirrored the cycles we see in the myth of Persephone and Hades, proof that civilizations separated by miles and cultures still tapped into the same archetypal truths. In Hinduism, the Trimurti represents the three cosmic functions: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer. Zeus can be seen in the role of order and preservation, much like Vishnu. Poseidon, whose storms and earthquakes constantly reshape the land, mirrors the transformative destruction of Shiva. Hades, governing the finality of death, also reflects Shiva's role as the destroyer who makes rebirth possible. This shows that the Greeks, though unique in their myths, were tapping into the same universal idea, that life and existence require creation, preservation, and destruction. Later, in Christianity, the concept of three in one emerged in the Holy Trinity: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. While different in essence, the echoes are undeniable. The Father as authority, the Son as mediator, and the Spirit as the unseen force that flows through all. Each reflects humanity's deep-rooted understanding that power and divinity are best expressed in triadic balance. The archetypal truth. Why do these trinities repeat across cultures? Carl Jung, the great psychologist, would call them archetypes, patterns embedded in the collective unconscious of humanity. The Greeks did not invent the idea of three realms. They expressed a truth that humans everywhere have felt: that life requires balance between the seen and unseen, between order and chaos, between beginning and end. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades were not just gods. They were symbols of the forces that govern our lives: authority, unpredictability, and mortality. When we look at this trinity, we see more than myth. We see a mirror of our own existence. Zeus reminds us that life requires structure, justice, and order. Without rules, society crumbles. Poseidon reminds us that life is also chaos, change, and unpredictability. No plan survives the storm unchanged. Hades reminds us that all things end, but endings are beginnings in disguise. Death is the boundary that gives life meaning. Together, these three gods teach us that balance is the eternal truth. To live fully, we must respect order, embrace chaos, and accept mortality. And so, as we journey back in time to ancient Greece, we see that the myths of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades are not dusty relics of forgotten temples. They are timeless lessons, written in the language of gods, but meant for humanity. They teach us that power is not absolute, that chaos is not always destructive, and that death is not the end, but part of a greater cycle. They connect us to Egyptians, Hindus, Christians, and countless others who also saw truth in the Trinity. When the Greeks looked at the sky, the sea, and the earth, they did not see random forces. They saw meaning, they saw stories, they saw gods, and through these gods, they understood themselves. If you've enjoyed this journey into the heart of Greek mythology, then join us as we continue exploring the forgotten truths and hidden wisdom of the ancient world. Subscribe to the Journey Back in Time so you never miss an episode. Hit the like button to help spread these stories to others who are searching for meaning. And share this video with a friend who loves mythology, history, or philosophy. Because these stories are not just about the past, they're about all of us. The gods of Olympus may belong to another age, but their lessons live on. The sky, the sea, and the underworld still speak to us, if only we dare to listen. So tell me in the comments, which of the three brothers speaks most to you? Zeus, Poseidon, or Hades? Until next time, thank you for walking with us through the echoes of history. And remember, the past is never truly gone. It is alive, waiting, and always ready to guide us. Check out the next video coming up. There we dive even deeper into the ancient past. This is the Journey Back in Time.